What's up, everybody? Pastor Matt here. Thanks for checking into the YouTube channel. Hey, I just have to do an instant reaction video to the Supreme Court news here. I have hardly been able to think about anything else for more than 24 hours or so. My goodness, 36 hours since the news broke Monday night that Politico had leaked a Supreme Court draft by Samuel Alito indicating that, yes, a majority of the Supreme Court justices, at least 5-4 as I understand it, have sided together to end Roe versus Wade. This is a momentous moment in my life. I'm 45, 46 years old. My entire life, Roe versus Wade has been the law of the land. And so for about a day and a half after the news dropped Monday night from Politico, many people were wondering, is this actually real? Could this really be true? Of course, there was some suggestion that it might be a hoax or something like that, but all the people who initially looked at this document, this draft opinion, seem to confirm, even down to the footnotes, that this is in fact a very real thing. And then later, yesterday, of course it's Wednesday morning now, yesterday, Tuesday afternoon, Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts confirmed that yes, this is in fact a real draft, although it is still in draft form. There's still time for any of the justices to change their opinions. Usually these things, by the way, are dropped in June or July of the summer, not in, this time of year. This is pretty early for that. But since I've been thinking so much about this, I thought, man, I just have to do kind of an instant reaction video here and just share some of the emotions that have been swirling through my heart in the last day or so. So anyways, welcome to this channel. If you're new or visiting, my name is Matthew Everhard. I'm the pastor of Gospel Fellowship PCA. We are a Reformed Bible-believing church just north of Pittsburgh here in Western Pennsylvania. Come visit us sometime. Gospel Fellowship PCA. So the first emotion that came over me, I saw it early Tuesday morning on Twitter. All of a sudden, the Twitter feed just going crazy, going bonkers about this. My first emotion was, of course, joy. 50 years Christians have been fighting against this unjust law. Has very, very thin foundation in an actual constitutional law, of course. It was really just a shroud of an excuse to be able to permit abortion here in the United States of America. And Christians have been praying against this for 50 years. We've been working against this. We've been doing grassroots organizing. We've been witnessing to our unbelieving friends and neighbors. We've been trying to apologize in the sense of the biblical term of apologia, a rational, biblical, logical defense of the pro-life position. Some of us have been writing about these things. You may not know this, but one of my earlier books was about abortion from a pro-life position. I defended the position in that book that abortion is acceptable morally in no circumstances, not even rape or incest or anything like that. I'm completely 100% and absolutely pro-life. But Christians have been defending, we've been fighting, we've been working for 50 years. And yes, voting too. Voting certainly has come into play here. And so the first emotion that I experienced was joy. I ran up the stairs. I kissed my wife good morning. She was still in bed. I was getting up for work. And I told her the news. My wife, by the way, works for a pro-life ministry that cares for women in distressing pregnancy situations. And so she was elated as well. And as soon as this joy of the news kind of swept over me, the second emotion I felt was disgust. And I really began to feel my heart being bifurcated at that moment. Disgust. Why disgust? Because of the leak, because of the way this happened. This is, once again, another incidence of the betrayal of trust of the way our government is supposed to work. The Supreme Court never does leaks like this, and we don't know who it is, but it certainly would seem to indicate that there was a clerk from one of the more liberal progressive justices. We don't know that for sure. But I've been listening to various other commentators thinking about this, talking about this. No other scenario really makes sense other than a leak for the very purpose of intimidating perhaps the 5 justices who are in agreement with the majority, what is now the majority position, that this unjust law should be removed from the books, perhaps to sway one of them by fear, intimidation, to terrorize them into moving back to what is supposed to be the acceptable position of a progressive nation. Not only that, but to foment and to stir up what would seem to be domestic terrorism, within our society. A couple of years ago, 2020, the summer BLM and Antifa riots, those were not accidental things. Those were intentionally provoked. in collusion between progressive agents within our, what we might call the deep state of our society, and the corporate media to stoke those fires, to bring about as much persuasion by means of violence as possible within an otherwise civilized society. And so disgust, absolute disgust that this confidentiality, the Supreme Court was one of the last vestiges of our constitutional order in which most people had a reverence and a respect for the way the process works. We've lost confidence in the president long ago. We've lost confidence in Congress long ago. They have very, very low approval ratings. But as far as I understand it, the approval rating for the Supreme Court is something of dignity and reverence. And now for this kind of inward, dastardly, inside pitch type of baseball, man, this really, really bothered me. And so I went quickly from joy to disgust, but then I swung back to conviction because I really believe that we're right on these issues. Christians, we are. We know the Bible teaches that life begins at conception. We know that the Lord is sovereign in fertility, conception, childbirth, life, all the way to death. The Lord is sovereign over these things. And we know Scripture is abundantly clear that it is wrong to take life unjustly, and that abortion is the taking of a life unjustly. No matter how you splice it, no matter what euphemisms you use, the word abortion itself is a euphemism to avoid having to describe what it actually does. Of course, the word to abort means to stop or to cease, but that's only the best euphemism that can be concocted to avoid describing the fact that children are chemically burned and or dismembered in the womb. Try to describe one literally, and you'll see that it is truly the murder of a child in an unjust manner. And we who are biblical and Christian in our understandings of these things, we see children as a blessing from the Lord, not a curse. Having a child is a blessing and not a curse. The Scripture tells us to be fruitful and multiply in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. And therefore, it is our duty to enact just laws as Christian people. And so I felt myself just welling with conviction, underscoring my determination to live, preach, teach, and write in a biblical manner. And then after that conviction, I felt another swelling up of hope that perhaps we might even be taking some steps as a society back towards the federal system of entrusting the states to enact the laws voted on by the citizens rather than from some sort of judicial decree coming down, which avoids the legislative process, which was written into the very fabric of our nation from the beginning. Interesting too, I don't know if you heard President Biden's comments yesterday, but he made yet another Biden gaffe where he admitted that the unborn fetus embryo is actually a child. He used the word child, and it's funny when sometimes people accidentally speak the truth. And so there's Biden, even as he's arguing for the pro-choice position, saying he's going to do everything in his power to legalize abortion in every possible way. Yet he inadvertently admits that yes, it is a child that we're talking about in the cruel and heinous act of an abortion. So even in that false admittal by Biden, I had a little bit of hope there, because I do truly believe that the more you talk about truth, the more evident it becomes. And this is just another slip of the tongue evidence that yes, we all know what this person is growing in the womb. It is a child, it is a human being. The more we try to obfuscate or avoid that fact, the more obvious it becomes. Remember, we now live in the sonogram era. Okay, we can see what's happening. We no longer have to invent false biological terms. First, second, third trimester. We don't have to guess at what point the heartbeat begins or brain function begins. We know all these things now. We know so much more about fetal development than they did in 1973. And even then, they weren't ignorant on these matters. They knew better, and yet they used this as some sort of a political compromise. And now, perhaps it may finally be over. Let's hope and pray. So then I shifted back to fear again, because what do you think happened? Well, of course you know what happened. Intimidation, riot stirring, and once again, Antifa and these nefarious movements within our society began to terrorize cities. Yes, Portland, Los Angeles, perhaps other places as well. fighting in the streets, violence against police, all of these things that we dreaded to see on our television screens. At least those of us were honest that these were not mostly peaceful riots or mostly peaceful protests. We knew that they were riots. I do have some fear in my heart, I must confess, that we're going to go through another such summer of intentionally stirred unrest brought about by the media's demonic love with the evil sacraments of the culture of death, which is abortion. But then finally, I swing back one more time to trust in the sovereignty of God, that the Lord is good, and He will never betray His covenant people in His faithfulness. Now, that's not to confuse the United States government with His covenant people. But we do know that the Lord's plan is sovereign, that He superintends all things, that He governs and controls the trajectory not only of this nation, but of all nations. And so we do hope and pray that His kingdom will come on earth as it is in heaven. Well, those were some of my sort of quick instant reaction, emotions, gut checks. Love to hear what you think about this. Do you agree with me? Tell me where I got it wrong. Tell me where I got it right. Thanks for watching this video. Love you lots, and we'll talk to you later.